Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button and sharing your comments in the comments section. And for those of you who also want to listen to my podcast, you could find the podcast on mindbodyspirit.fm for audio syndication podcasts. Today's guest in the Wisdoms of Jacob's Ladder is a return guest, and her name is Sherianna Boyle. Sherianna will be discussing her new upcoming book, Ways to Really Manage Your Emotions, how to incorporate mental health and spirituality together, and more. So without further ado, we bring on Sherianna Boyle on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Sherianna Boyle, it's such an honor to have you back here on my channel. It's a true pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. I always enjoy our conversations, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I believe I had you on the channel like a year or two ago, and I've had wonderful feedback from that conversation. And I thought in my head, we're starting the new year. I couldn't think of a better guest to bring on the new year. But for some of my viewers, particularly on my new network that I've audio syndicated on mindbodyspirit.fm, you're a complete new guest, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about you. You've been making the rounds for years, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and what got you to it? Because you're just a fascinating, I consider a therapist, healer, multiple, you've written many books, so you're a luminary, a thought influencer in my eyes. But again, that's just my perspective.
You're very sweet. You're very sweet.
Well, thank you. I'm sure you could articulate yourself a little bit more than I can. But yeah, just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and your biggest passions these days and how those came into being.
So thank you for that, Jacob. I'm the author of 11 books, and that's what you're referring to. Just Us Spirit is the latest book that you and I will probably talk a little bit about today. And I've been writing since 2012. That's when I published my first book. I'm also an adjunct psychology professor, adjunct mindfulness/yoga professor. I've been doing that for about 16 years now. And so I spend my time writing, teaching, and then coaching. So I have Emotional Detox Coaching, which has merged sort of into this. A lot of people come to me for coaching and then they realize I channel spirit. And then the next thing I know, they're really scheduling an appointment to have me connect with spirit. And I do things a little differently when I coach. I will connect and guide people, but I will also teach them how to do it for themselves. So they're getting a little bit of hand-holding there, reminding them that they have the answers inside of them. But that's predominantly how I spend my time. I also podcast like you. I have a podcast called Just Us Spirit, which of course, as you know, that really gets us out there. In terms of podcast world, you have one of the best things about it is you meet a lot of people. And so I've done over 200 shows now. I'm not sure where you're at with your shows, Jacob.
This is episode 82. This will be episode 82. So we're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah. So when you do over 200 shows, and I've probably done more than that because I've been on a couple radio networks, and those didn't go into my podcast channel. So I know I've done more than that. And so I've been talking about this stuff for a long time.
Yeah. You go way back. And but I'm listening to you now. I'm hearing it's almost a book a year that it seems like you're writing. And
I wish. COVID slowed me down.
Yeah, a lot of people. But my curiosity is for yourself, and as just author to author, like how do you write so many books, and what is behind that? Is it like a nudge from spirit to get a book out? Do you feel that calling? Is it channeled, your writings?
Well, I think one of my advantages was for the first 5 books, I was with the same publisher. So when you are with the same publisher, you get a relationship with them, and I didn't have to go go through a lot of hoops in terms of pitching
Mhm.
for my next book. So very often what happens to me is I'll finish a book and I literally will say almost every time, okay, I'm not going to write for a while. That was like a ton of work and I can't keep doing that. I need a break. And then all of a sudden, spirit will just drop it in. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. It's too good. And I'll mention it to a publisher and they'll be like, oh, that's good. That's good. And so that was like the first 5 years. Then I started to want to branch out. You naturally are like, oh, what else is out there? I've been doing this with this publisher for a while. And I've always loved Sounds True. And that was one of my goals. My childhood goals was to write for dreams, I should say. Sounds True. And I think that's the book I met you, Energy in Action, a book about manifesting, which I still don't talk about enough, is about a book about manifesting with light. And Sounds True picked that up. And then and then I think I was with Macmillan. I don't know. I've bounced around, which has been great experience because now I've had different publishing experiences, different teams that I've worked with. And now I'm going back to my original publisher at some point. So it's just interesting. You learn a lot. Times have changed. COVID slowed things down. But I think when you have those relationships, it gets a little easier to keep the ball rolling.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're first starting, you feel like you have to sell yourself. And once they get to know you and they know your work ethic and they know what you're all about and they just automatically know that you're fit for them. I'm not saying I haven't had rejections, Jacob. I've had my fair share of
Mm.
publishers turning me down or turning my work down, I should say. It's not really me. And most of them say, you have great, great work, but we just don't know if it's going to sell. Because the bottom line is if they don't feel like it's going to be profitable, they're going to turn it down. Or maybe they have another author that's doing something a little too close and they don't want that. So, especially in the same time that they're coming out. So, I think there's a lot of factors there.
What would you say is the spiritual significance and psychological and spiritual significance of writing a story or a book? Because I know I work with a lot of my clients on that, but I'm just curious from someone who's written 11 books, for yourself personally and professionally, how could you speak to writing as an effective tool, for viewers listening?
Well, it's interesting you're asking me this because I just had a client yesterday and I don't see many people in person anymore since COVID. But this one I will see. So this person's local. So we sit down to work together and she wanted energy healing. That was why she booked it. But as soon as I sat down, I felt spirit say, I said, "Are you writing?" And
Mhm.
she said, "It's funny you ask." And I said, "Well, it's coming in loud and clear. They want me to talk to you about the right." She had started writing a book a couple years ago. And I knew when she came to me, she's not ready to this is still in the very infant stages because there is something emotionally you have to feel, there's a process that you go through. And sometimes you do write a few drafts. And maybe the first draft, you're crying your eyes out and snot's dripping down your face. And then you get through that and you're like, okay, that's out of my system. Draft two kind of thing. And so anyway, I now we're a couple of years later and I said, "Are you writing?" And I just felt it. I felt like this is the time. So I put her on the table. We were doing energy healing and I asked spirit, I said, I asked her title and I knew. I was like, that's not going to sell. I just knew. I didn't say that, of course, but I did say, "Are you open to other ideas?" And she said, "Yeah, I am." I said, well, I'll ask spirit. Oh, Jacob, I wish I could tell you the title I channeled for her because man, I came home, I told my daughter, I was like, that's a damn good title. It will do very well. And I said to her, you better do your due diligence with that title because it's a winner. And she's like, I will, I promise. I said, no slacking, like write a good book because you got a winning title there. So it felt aligned. She was like, that's amazing. She's like, I know that's why I'm here. And I'm like, I think you just came so I could give you the title. And then a little energy healing while we're at it. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that it's very therapeutic. I think the timing has to be right because you are putting yourself out there in the world. And that's very scary for some people, if you're, especially if it's about your story. And I think there's a lot of different factors, but you don't have to rush it. I didn't rush my first book at all. In fact, in this book, the 11th one, Just as Spirit, took me forever to write.
Mm.
I was like, I even was like, what the heck's going on with me? I'm like, it was just, I had to work through some stuff and that happens. That's very normal. And I was like, but I didn't realize even from a spiritual perspective, even though it wasn't raised religious per se, there was some conditioning there I had to work through.
Mhm. So,
And
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you would say timing is like anything else is a big part of publishing, and you feel that a book is not just something that comes from us, but through us. You would say there's a higher calling with these books from the universe?
Yeah, I do. I definitely think there's a channeling process that is to it when you feel called to share. And I definitely think, like with my client, and again, I'm going on what I was being guided with spirit. I said to her, you got a whole new career coming.
Mm,
This is going to like change your life.
mm. Well, I
And
definitely,
it
yeah.
will change your life, and she's ready for it because she's ready for change. So timing, I think, is important. And sometimes you do have to get your feet wet though
Mhm.
before you hit the ground running, and you just have to try it, try everything. You know that song from Zootopia, try everything. You've ever sung that song? I love that song. And it's a song about I'm going to try even if I think I can fail, I'm still going to try.
Mm,
I try everything and don't let failure get in the way of it.
yeah. And I also think for people who are interested in writing a book is we could be our own biggest self-critics. And sometimes we'll look at our work and we'll think it's not great, but someone else will pick it up and be like, wow, this was life altering for myself. And, it's impossible to satisfy everyone, but if you're able to influence, just one person, that book had a purpose. That book made a difference. And it's not, yeah, I think there's cathartic value. It's not all about you, but you just think of the value that it could have to another, I would say.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I mean, you have editors that are giving input, and if unless you're self-publishing, but I always say don't ask your friend to edit it. You really
Right, right,
want a
right.
professional editor because they're very valuable, and so they don't want they want you to look good out there. And the nice part about traditional publishing, which is why I choose one of the reasons I choose that route, is you get multiple editors. So what one doesn't catch, another one will. And I like, quality is important to me for sure.
Yeah. Many heads are better than one head, as they say. So,
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm definitely not a great editor. That I'm not.
right, right. I could fully attest to having good editors and proofers and a whole team behind your book. Yeah. I just wanted to backtrack. I know you mentioned you had traditional, training in the mental health field and psychological field. How did you get to the point of trying to maybe merge or step into more, of the energetic approach or the intuitive approach with your work? Was that always something that was calling you, or is there a particular situation that said, hey, you know what? The bandwidth of what I'm doing is kind of limiting and I need to go a different like how did that all come to be? Because
Mm,
you're, doing this now is very innovative, but you did this, years ago. So kind of imagine that was quite
yeah.
daring.
Well, I owned a yoga studio years ago. So
Wow.
after I left the schools, I was a school psychologist and I took a leave.
Mhm.
Was guided to open a place. I was going to a yoga studio that I loved, but back then, now it's very different. It had one style of yoga, and I thought it would be great to have a place that offers different styles of yoga, not just one version of it. And so I opened up a yoga studio with that intention. And at the time, my our money was limited. So I was taking yoga, this previous to opening it. I was taking a lot of classes, and my husband was like, "You're spending a lot of money on yoga." And I was like, "Okay, I guess." And I thought to myself, "Well, I'm a Taurus. I'm a little stubborn. And I'm the type of person like if you tell me I can't have something, I will find a way to have it." So I said, "Okay, I'm gonna get trained. And then when I get trained, I know I'm gonna get to go to that yoga for free if I work there, right?" And so that's what I did to sort of get around that piece. And then I ended up saying, "Okay, I really want to open my own place up." And so what I did was, again, I money was tight. So I had a ton of workshops. And so I would bring people in that I would want to get trained in. And then I get it for free.
Smart.
So different like certifications, or I'd be like, "Oh, you're this. Okay, great. Will you come in and then I'll, sort of be your co-support person." But of course I don't have to pay. So I did all sorts of modalities like that for years. And I think that's when you know you're connected to spirit, Jacob. Like
Mm.
when you're connected and you feel guided, you you just keep going and you don't let any, obstacles or opinions or you just figure it out. And for me, that's how I know now that I'm on my path when I have that sort of because there's things that I'm challenged with or I'm like, "Oh yeah, whatever, forget it. Have it your way."
Mm.
Right? It's not worth it to me because I don't feel it energetically. I don't feel connected to it. I don't feel as passionate about it. I've always felt a strong passion. And part of that also was when I left the schools, I realized how burnt out I was.
Mm. Yeah.
And that was taking a lot of and depression and becoming a mom and not knowing who I am and all of those things for many years. And I've never been a medication person. I tried it and I've never been one where antidepressants work for me. It always made me feel worse. So I said, I got to figure this out. Again, this isn't working, but I'm not going to give up on my mental health. I'm not going to give up on my family. Figure it out. So it was like, okay, I'll start going to yoga. That's supposed to be good, right? Okay. Then another obstacle comes in. So you see, it's just like that's sort of how I live my life.
Wow. Well, from one Taurus to another, I had no idea you were a Taurus either, but there is, there's some stigma to being stubborn, but being stubborn can be good too. You're able to break down walls and barriers and do your will. So I don't know. For some reason, Taurus are very stigmatized. They just think we just sit on the couch and eat potato chips all day and think about food and sense, but not really. We're very once we're driven to something, we could be Velcro behinds, but
We're very
once
loyal.
we're very loyal, we're very
Yeah, we're
grounded,
very
and
loyal. Yeah.
once we have our mindset on things, nothing will ever stop a Taurus. So, and you're
No.
a living embodiment of that. But would you say that going through some of that period changed you in the way and allowed you to be more inspired to help others when you're going through some of those uncertain moments or painful moments? Was that Because I'm just wondering, is there a purpose behind pain that you feel from yourself individually or collectively?
Yeah, I mean, I've been helping others forever. I mean, when I was in school and training, getting my degrees in psychology and then getting my master's and then getting my advanced graduate study and all of that, I was always in internships and stuff. I worked in a prison for a while. I was offered a full-time position, benefits, everything. I'm at the end. They loved my work, and I was like, thank you, but no, thank you. Prison is not my future here. That's not my thing as much as so I've always been drawn to helping people that are really hurting.
Mm.
And I grew up with a brother that went to prison. So I knew what that was like. He was a lot older than me. And so maybe about 7 or 8 years old, I was visiting the prison on Sundays and going through security and watching the families. So I was naturally drawn to that. I think it was just in me that I saw things that a lot of kids don't see at that age and the impact. I always wanted to help. That's the way I took it was, okay, I'm going to someday, mental note, I'm going to help people. And so that led to one thing and then the next thing. So had that not happened where I had those experiences early on, then I don't know what I would have been drawn to.
It seems like you're a bit of an intuitive empath. Would you agree with that assessment, or because from the sensitivity to medications, or always wanting to help out others and being intuitive? Is that about right with you, that you are an empath and intuitive, or maybe an HSP?
Yeah, I definitely am an empath. I'm definitely intuitive. I think where I work with a lot of empaths and I'm able to set boundaries. And I think that helps me. And I'm able to, and maybe being a Taurus helps me with that too, Jacob. Because I think sometimes some empaths don't know how to say no. That's you probably experienced that because they care so much. They
Oh
take
my
everything
gosh, yeah,
hard.
yeah.
I think when you grow up with, I again, it's part of my upbringing. There were parts of me where I had to be a little badass. I don't know if we're on the radio and I shouldn't have said this, but are we on the radio too?
It's all good, yeah.
Okay, okay. I gotta watch that. Uh, and so there were parts of my upbringing. My mother went out with a narcissist. I mean, I know that term is thrown around a lot, but I'm telling you, it was like the his picture could be in the DSM.
Uh,
This is the example. So there were parts of me that had to be very alert and very aware and of things. So that has helped me as well. So yes, I'm empathetic, but I'm also at the same time I have the ability to say, wait a minute, follow my gut. That's where intuition can keep you safe and keep you from going off your path for too long. It's not that we don't all go in a little bit different direction or we don't get a little I start going this way, but I think that those early experiences have taught me don't stray too far, come back to that compass.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure for people tuning into my channel and following your work, there's a lot of empaths tuning in, the likelihood. Is there like something specific to summarize your professional and personal experience that you feel is most important for empaths to really integrate in their lives? Like a particular pattern that you're noticing that empaths fall into, whether that be
Mm.
in relationships, career, that you feel is like like one or two like most important bullet points for empaths to put into place.
I think remember that you are not powerless.
Mm.
And you have the ability to change anything, transform anything. You don't have to sit and cope. So all my emotional detox, that was sort of my where and I got my signature, when I wrote Emotional Detox and a couple three emotional detox books there. And that's when you realize, you're not powerless. You have a say. And with the emotional detox, I say, don't be a cope addict.
Mm.
So COPE, cope addict. Coping is great, but it's not processing. So I cope when I go to, let's say I'm in traffic, I have to cope with that, play the radio. I might call a friend or something like that to cope with a long drive. But once I'm done, I need to process whatever came up along the way. And so I think that's what I learned is you're not a victim here. And if you're in coping, that means you're tolerating or you're putting up with or you're minimizing. And you have the power to change that, anything. I think working with energy, learning to work with energy is super important. And in addition to, and someone like yourself, I think as a therapist, I think seeing someone like you with that spiritual approach as well, I think is super important. I think you need a little bit of everything. And so I would just say, remember, your emotions are a tremendous resource. They will take you out of coping and they will help you to process. And once you do that, you're going to raise your vibration. And then once you raise your vibration, you can do anything. You do not have to sit in something and no one else has anything up on you. It's very often we get in our own way.
Mm. So, I mean, do you feel that, because I know I hear a lot of people in the spiritual field like almost talk about emotional bypassing in a way, and this this continual emphasis on positive psychology and not wanting to go to the negative or stuff like that. But do you feel that it's helpful for people to really connect emotionally? Like emotions have a certain purpose.
Oh God,
Is
yeah.
that, yeah.
You mean in terms of I'm not a fan of like positive Pollyanna where I'm ignoring or minimizing an emotion. For example, if somebody says, let's say they're talking about their husband or something, and their husband says, "Oh, it's so cloudy today," and they're like, "No, it's not cloudy. Look at the sun. It's beautiful." Like that's like stepping on whatever it is, right? That I'm not a fan of that, like forcing people to look a certain way and not allowing them, to have a moment or whatever. That maybe they just have a moment where they're not feeling so great for whatever it is. And so I think my motto is all emotions are good so long as they're processed. And spirit is the one that said to me, there's only when this one I wrote Emotional Detox for Anxiety. And that's when spirit said, there's only one emotion, love. Everything else is a reaction. That
Mm.
means, and I'm not saying you have to agree with me, Jacob, because I know you're a wise one over there, but this is what spirit said.
I love it.
Everything is a reaction. Shame's a reaction. Guilt's a reaction. Fear's a reaction. And love is the only thing that's real. So, and I know if that helped me tremendously in my emotional detox because I felt like I had so much, I would probably be here for the rest of my life. Clearing emotions. If you're like, okay, this negative emotion, this negative, I'd be like, okay, how much time do you have? Because it will be the rest of my life that I'll be clearing this trauma. So when spirit brought me that message, I was like, you're right. So what do we clear? We clear reactions, not emotions. And so that's helped me a great deal. Remembering that this is not an emotion. I'm having a reaction.
Sure. It makes total sense. And being on the other side, having a near death experience, I really understood that that is all there is, and everything else is temporary. But for a lot of clients I run into who are going through there are various degrees of acuity of pain, whether that be grief, trauma, depression. What I run into is a little bit of a conflict where their mind says, I just want to feel better, but their emotions are, I'm processing and I'm dealing with something quite difficult. Is there, and I'm sure there's someone out there who's probably in this conundrum, is there something that you could speak to, someone who really wants to feel better, but right now is maybe going through, their own natural processings towards a difficult situation, um, and having a little bit of incongruency, what they want versus how they feel?
I think that's where Just Ask Spirit can come in.
Mhm,
And so in that book is where I talk about connect, feel first, then ask, number one.
mhm,
So even with our spirituality, we can bypass emotions. And I just say, slow down, connect to what you feel. And then there's a point in there where so in this book is different because it's laid out where they're going to have space to write things in. And I would ask for help. I would ask for support. I would ask for healing. I would ask for love. I would ask to learn some things. There's some things that you need to learn. If you're sitting in depression, you might need to learn about protection.
yeah,
You might need to learn about resilience. You might need to learn about true power.
mhm,
Because again, you're not powerless. So there's some things that you need to learn if you're someone who's like, I'm just want my mood to change. You might need to learn about health or healthy eating. I'm not sure, but there's some things for you to learn if you're sitting in something. There's some things for you to know. And that's how you know you're connected to spirit. Again, it's that curiosity.
mm,
Once you stop being curious, you're disconnected, but that's okay. You can connect again. Remember, you're way more than your circumstances or your physical body or what's happened to you in your life. And everybody has this ability. And you might even have it stronger than people that you admire. And so I think that's what I would say to that person is lean into spirit a little bit more, but let your emotions lead you there.
mhm. And do you also find that when people are going through pain, that could also develop more avenues of self-compassion too as well, where they're able to really learn how to speak to that, the shadow within themselves and those uncomfortable feelings as well?
Yeah, and I think sometimes reframing pain to that pain word, it's like anything, our words carry vibration. I found with empaths, they're very sensitive to words.
Mm,
Uh, have to be very careful. And if you have an empath in your life, you might notice that you may like, I can't say anything. But like they're so sensitive. You know who they are. And it might be you yourself. And so change the wording around a little bit. You don't have to use that word pain if you don't want to. You maybe it's more about release. I
yeah,
also movement is important. I think bodily movement. Um, I'm more and more leaning into that. Just as spirit, I talk about dancing and um, freely, not choreograph kind of stuff, but
mm,
moving your body. And because it gets your breath moving, it gets energy moving, it gets you connected. Uh, Things like that, I think, can help if you can get a little movement in your life. If
yeah,
if you're down in the dumps, you definitely have to think about moving your body for sure.
yeah. And something that's thrown out there these days is a lot is the vagus nerve,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
brain, and as well as blood flow in the brain, and how that could improve our mood and decrease anxiety. So I could totally attest to moving and grooving. Now, for yourself, you dipped your feet into two worlds with the psychological world, and the spirit world. Is they're a world where you see the two worlds, really coinciding? Do you feel they're in conflict? Like, how do you find spirituality to be an asset within mental health or psychological, health within your own practice or their lives of, other clients?
Yeah, I mean, my motto is, well, this was spirit that guided me on this was feel first, then if necessary, talk about it. And I think the psychology world and what I was trained in was talk about it first, and maybe that'll get you to feeling. But I'm the spiritual part of it, when you blend, gets you to do the feeling first.
Mhm.
And then you see, then what you need to talk about usually will change. So again, if I move, it's just the difference between if I went for a walk versus I didn't go for a mindful walk. So
Mm,
that conversation, I might say, okay, I really need to talk to you, Jacob, about something, but I'm going to go out for a walk in nature for a little bit. And I'm not going to look at my phone and wear earbuds and all that stuff. And I'm going to go out and we're going to talk about this, Jacob, when I get back, right? Guarantee when I'm done with that walk, my the tone, the pace, the way we exchange might be different. Or I might be like, okay, I just worked through I worked through whatever it was, or I changed what it is I want to focus on. It might not happen that easily, but unless you're steaming on your walk, that's the other thing. If you're ruminating, which actually the research says happens quite a bit, especially if a walking partner where they like to complain or vent, that
I,
might not serve you.
I don't know. I don't know to this day how people do that. I'm a big runner and I'm already out of breath when I try to run myself and then try to talk to somebody. That just exhausts. Like I would maybe last like half a mile instead of like 6 miles
Yeah, I
that I
can.
run. But
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe some people are more the air quality, the air sign quality, but they need that communication. But Tauruses aren't as much like that. We just like to be on our own and just kind of do our thing. But some people, yeah,
Or Earth. Yeah.
they always need to be communicating and talking about things and gossiping, and that's just
Some
their energy.
people are. And then I have a girlfriend that is so energetically sensitive that like we just have to keep it light
Yeah.
because it for her, and I can tell if she change if you have a friend where they're changing the topic, pick up on that because they're telling you this is too much for me right now.
Yeah.
I wanted our time to look different together. I wanted to receive or to fill myself up here.
Right.
And so I have to pay attention to that. I have a friend where I just know her. I know when we go for walks where we're talking about the birds and light stuff. We don't really get too heavy. And if we do, I know because she'll change the subject. I'm like, okay, there's my cue
Mm.
kind
That's
of
where
thing.
that feeling part of yourself,
Yeah.
is very resourceful in relationships. And yeah, I think a lot of people are just focused on what they want to talk about. They're not like too
You're like,
busy.
oh, I can't wait to walk with them. Wait until they hear, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
like
You got it. You got to feel the other person. It's not all about just the thoughts in your head. Get a journal if that's the case, or a therapist. But
yeah,
anyway,
or the therapist. Yeah, so
or
true.
not to boost our businesses, but yeah, but yeah, but you also, and I was able to be very privileged to endorse an upcoming book that's in the works. It's going to be released. I'm just wondering, for viewers, could you tell us a little bit about your next upcoming book? What factored in? Is this is book number 11? Is that correct? Is
Yeah.
so again a numerological master number, my life path number 11. We can't wait to. It was a brilliant book, obviously. But for yourself, like what factored into getting this book, and what does this book entail, or maybe differentiate from some of your other 10 books, which is amazing. How you've written 10 books. I can't get over that. But yeah.
Well, each one has been inspired by spirit, and each one I've listened, and I've been saying just ask spirit for years and years. Never ever occurred to me to call it a book or a podcast. My clients would come to me, I would take them through the process of processing their emotions. and they would ask questions, I'd say, well, I'll ask spirit. I'll ask spirit. Let's just do this first and then I'll just ask spirit. And then one day I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? So I knew I was going to write a book called Just Ask Spirit. I decided to do the podcast first, really to buy myself some time. And I really used the podcast like a research. So I had some people on there that I thought I really want to hear from, like yourself, people who've had near death experiences. I wanted to know how different people define spirit and their experiences. So I interviewed about 150 people. I didn't ask everybody this question, but I did ask it quite often. How do you define spirit? What does spirit mean to you? And so that was sort of the beginning of me writing without writing, doing the research part. And it was wonderful because Spirit even sent me some people that had some real cutting edge research about the brain and the emotions and developing our intuition and our psychic abilities. And it really is interesting. And then I looked, of course, at a lot of people I admire out there. Many I couldn't get on the show. I tried, but they were just too big or too busy or whatever. But I did read their books or look at their work. Um, and so this was just something, again, it's that curiosity. Whenever I get curious, it's spirit. Whenever I can't stop, it's spirit. Whenever I feel like I just have to write this, I don't know why, but I just do. And you detach from outcome. Even the idea that, well, what if nobody picks it up? And you know what I actually ran that through my mind. I said, well, what if a publisher doesn't want it? Well, I said to myself, well, then you'll just self-publish it. Who cares? Self-publish it. You got to write this book. So it's like, all right. So that's how it worked. And it was amazing. I had amazing people come through that shared things like, what did the minds of a medium look like when we put EEGs on them and we study their brains and we look at the activity in the brain? And most wonderful thing I just couldn't believe came through was how much it's connected to emotional processing.
Wow. It's
And
like a full circle moment for
yeah, and
yeah.
how the same area. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. So basically the same areas of the brain light up when you're entering that field of consciousness, that field of awareness. And then you're getting those messages. And it isn't just messages that you can receive from spirit, you can receive healing. You can receive guidance. Like I said, don't sit in something like you're to have nothing. You can ask for things.
Mm,
There's things to know, there's things to learn. Help them improve you in some areas. And so with Just Ask Spirit, how it's different, they're still going to learn to process their emotions. That's the beginning. I have a system I teach. And then I'm going to show them where they ask, how to ask. There's going to be space for them to jot down their insights and their channelings. So you're going to get to know how that works for you. And then, of course, I close it out because there's a system with really allowing it, remembering your free will is in the game. Because a lot of people, they get little messages and guidance and feathers and this and that, but they don't take the next step, which is, okay, yes, I'm getting the message. What is happening in my life and what am I allowing now?
mm,
And so I just sort of coach them through that through the book. And they're going to learn about emotions, they're going to learn about spirit, they're going to get clear themselves. Like I
mm,
said, I had to get clear on some things that influenced me about spirit, and it wasn't my parents. My parents were very open-minded people. It was schools.
mm. Tell me about it. Oh. Well, when you think about it,
Education, yeah.
those years are so pivotal on our, just identity formulation, but also how we process life, because from a young age, we're almost dependent on teachers as sources of power, and as well as people outside of us. And I think your work is great because it allows us to understand that no, the answers aren't solely just in a book or in someone else, that we could connect to these answers, that we could just ask spirit. And it's very empowering. When we're going through things, it could be very disempowering, thinking like, I'm the one going through this. Who am I to like find answers within? But no, it's very countercultural in a way that in the world that were brought up in. So I love that you're doing that. And thank you for really highlighting schools, because my God, there's just
Well,
so many
you know how
issues.
many kids are bullied?
Yep.
And again,
Yes.
tolerating coping with situations and feeling powerless.
Yeah.
And there's a way to teach this without putting religion on anybody. I mean, that's what I really aim for in Just as Spirit. There's aspects of it, but so everybody can relate, but there's when you teach it through emotional processing, you kind of eliminate all of that
Mhm.
and you let people, believe in whatever they believe in. But for me, it's all connected. It's all one. We're not all separate up there, wherever, you could define that better than me in terms of that state of oneness.
Yeah. And
But
emotions are universal too. It goes beyond religion. I mean, certainly there's different cultural practices of emotions, but we all grieve, we all go through things. So I think that emotions have to be spiritual. Something's universal,
yeah,
must be spiritual. But I wanted to just have a role reversal before we cap off, and just ask that amazing question that you have based, your new book coming out, which is after conducting all these interviews and, really walking the talk, practicing this stuff. How would you define spirit? How does Sherianna Boyle define spirit? I'm very curious with everything that you've encountered, 200 interviews and 11 books. I'm very curious for viewers to hear.
well, my experience of spirit is it's pure unconditional love, pure unconditional love. I've experienced it many times in my life, this pure unconditional love. It is consciousness, it's infinite, it's strength. I don't think there's one word that could define spirit, Jacob. It's light for sure, absolutely light and very powerful.
Mm, yeah, I love it.
Very, yeah, very wise. But definitely we connect to it through consciousness, through raising our awareness, and you can't do that without processing your emotions. It's just good. You can try and you might hit it there's ways, but it's a lot easier. And I think spirit appreciates that. I think we give them a hand because many of those ascended beings of light, archangels, they're there to serve source, the creator. And they're not here to serve ego or separation. And so when we process our emotions, we help them complete what they're assigned to do, what they're devoted to, which is again that pure unconditional love, source energy. So you're assisting the higher realms when you choose to feel.
I love it. As I heard David Kessler once say, "What you feel, you can heal." So
Mm,
I I
absolutely.
I I I really do love that. And it's possible, I don't know if you agree with this, that as we evolve, so do our um, understanding of spirit. Evolves. It's not like a closed-ended definition. It's something that is an evolving interpretation as our consciousness evolves. Would you say that's true?
I think so. I think for me, it just becomes more solid.
Mm,
And I don't know if that's what happened to you with your experience, but for me, there's just the shadow of doubt. It just doesn't come in. And every experience is different. So when I do energy healing, it's always amazing to me how I think, I'm connected to certain, and then I get this whole, and it's like, I am not in control here.
Right.
Right. And so that's those moments are when I'm like, wow, when
Yeah.
I leave, I'm like, that was something. That was
Yeah.
something. Some things just can't be explained.
Mm. Yeah, I love what Suzanne Giesemann says when she says NOE, which is no other explanation.
Mm,
Some things
If
you just
I
can't articulate. But yeah, I'm wondering for you, this is a big year for you personally. You have your book coming out in
Mhm.
2025. Um, Individually, collectively, is there anything that you're seeing for yourself or for the planet to really know as we're going on to this new year? Anything that you're picking up on yourself or the world that is important to need to hear as we're embarking on this new chapter of this year?
Hmm. In terms of the collective energy, and I haven't really asked spirit about that. I have to be honest with you about the a forecast or what of 2025. I think that I don't have a negative view of it. That's for sure. I think that more all I can base it on is the change that I see, and this is what I love about being an adjunct professor because I get to be with the younger folks,
Yeah.
and so I see people more and more open to spirituality.
Oh, unquestionably.
It's
Yeah.
it's unbelievable, and I see it in the younger generations and really craving it and resonating with it quite quickly. It's interesting to me because what would have taken me longer years ago, it seems like right away we're just clicking
Mm.
in terms of the students. I have students that have never been to a yoga class ever, have never been to any kind of mindfulness, and they just resonate. It's like something inside them. It's like their soul. So I'm hopeful about what's to come. I think more and more people are going to be coming aligned. I've seen people that are very, very religious that are starting to soften those edges and be open to hearing other perspectives. So I think I feel good about it. Of course, there's things that we need to go through, and I haven't asked spirit, so I don't want to speak about it. I'll have to ask about that though, Jacob. So thank you.
Just that spirit.
I will just
That's
ask spirit about that.
the
I
name of
think
the
I'm
game.
not really curious. I think that's what it is it's never if I'm curious, I'll ask. If I'm not curious, it's not for me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, it seems like you've got a lot going on from your book coming out, as well as I've saw like a couple of retreats that you're doing. But is there anything in particular that you would like to share that you're going to be doing this
Sure.
upcoming year?
Yeah.
Uh,
So I'll be at Kripalu Yoga and Health Center. That's in the Berkshires doing Just Ask Spirit. And I have a weekend retreat there, January 31st to February 2nd. I'm doing that with my friend DJ Mantra, who's wonderful and also psychic medium and also does wonderful DJing. And I'm also doing an online retreat with Kripalu. So that's like a couple hour workshop. I shouldn't call it a retreat. It's like a 2 hour workshop. So if you budget is a concern to you, Kripalu's doing more and more of those things for people so people don't feel like they're not getting the information. So that's a wonderful new thing that they're rolling out that so Just Ask Spirit online workshop where I'll guide you through the steps of asking spirit. And then I'll be there in the summer for emotional detox. And then I'll be at Omega Institute in July for Just Ask Spirit again, which you were at, right?
I'm going to be at this October, so
Oh,
this upcoming
great.
October.
Oh, you got October. That's a nice time to be there. I'd rather be October.
Yeah.
Foliage and everything. How
Oh
cool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's maybe a 2 hour drive from my home, so maybe
What
less.
is yours going to be on?
It's kind of like an afterlife symposium type thing, and be working with a couple of other psychic mediums. We're going to be talking about the afterlife, and so it's like a
Cool.
panel weekend thing. So
Ooh,
it's gonna
that
be
sounds
fun.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, that would have been cool if we were the same weekend, but it's not like we would have time to talk to each other much. But yeah, I've never been to Omega, so I'm excited about being there. I've never been to run.
Likewise, likewise. I
Yeah.
mean, I posted online about it and people were going into my DMs and said, that used to be a Jewish sleepaway camp. I had no idea. So I'm like, all right, as a Jewish guy, I feel right at home now, so it's pretty cool. I'm just going to sleepaway camp there. But,
That's too funny.
it was hollow ground then and hollow ground now. It's a
Yeah.
safe space. But yeah, this
Right.
is a huge year for you. Coming up, a lot of retreats and programs. In your book, is there for people who may really want to, learn more about you, follow your work? Obviously, I would recommend booking a session if you're wanting to really move the needle in your life. Like, where would be the best way to contact or follow you?
Sure. It's at sheriannaboyle.com. So if you go to use my name, sheriannaboyle.com, and then the book is at justuspiritbook.com, and you'll see the retreats there listed on my website, as well as Just Us Spirit podcast.
Yeah, and give her a follow on Instagram. I
Oh,
see
yeah.
a
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
wonderful account.
Do the whole thing. At Sherianna.Boyle. I didn't quite know what I was doing when I made that.
Uh,
In the day, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm like, why did I put a dot there? Anyway.
it's meant to be.
Yeah, but thank you so much for having me. Enjoyed our time.
Thank you so much for your generous time and sharing, such incredible words. I know this is going to be very helpful.
And your endorsement for Just Us Spirit. So thank you.
A big honor. And any last messages or words? I know we've said a lot, or do you feel it's like the New York Times, like all the news is fit to print and we're good?
I just think I always say your emotions matter, processing them matters more. So that's how I'll end that. Just kind of think about that.
Mic drop. Sherianna Boyle, thank you so much for being my honored guest. You're welcome back anytime. And viewers, please do check out her website as well as her socials. She's got a lot of wonderful events and her new book coming out, Just Us Spirit, which I was honored to personally endorse. So, Sherianna Boyle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that was a wonderful interview with Sherianna. I learned a lot about different ways to understand emotions, to process emotions, integration of spirit and psychological and mental health well-being, and more. So I highly suggest checking out Sherianna's upcoming workshops, and if you're interested, to check out her individualized sessions. And she's a pleasure to have here back on the podcast, and perfect to ring in 2025. So I hope that this was a wonderful conversation that was very resourceful on your path and a great way to open up the new year in 2025, where there'll be a lot more wonderful guests like Sherianna coming on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and we'll see you soon as we continually ascend together on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Thank you.